Okay, so let's go into our lesson today. Today, students will be able to graph quadratic functions, identify key terms, and determine the domain and range. Okay, so a quadratic function. A quadratic function is pretty much anything with this x squared in it right here. That's pretty much what a quadratic function is. If it has an x squared and nothing higher, then it is probably a quadratic function. The quadratic parent function is y equals x squared. That means before we do anything at all to it, it starts as y equals x squared, and it looks like this. A parabola. Parabola is the shape of the quadratic function. This little U shape right here. So like a circle or whatever, it's this shape. Okay, that's called a parabola. The x-intercepts is where the parabola crosses through the x-axis. Keep in mind, we also call these solutions, roots, and zeros. They are all the same thing. So when I ask you what's a solution, you tell me the x-intercept. When I say what's a root, you tell me the x-intercept. When I ask what's a zero, you tell me the x-intercept. They're all the same thing. Vertex. The vertex is either the very highest or the lowest point of a parabola. So in this little parabola here, it's this little dot at the very bottom, and this parabola is the little dot at the very top. Axis of symmetry is the line that divides a parabola into two matching halves. So notice that this parabola looks the same on one side as it looks on the other. This line that goes straight through the center of it is called an axis of symmetry. And we call it x equals 2 because it crosses through the x-axis at, well, it should say 3, at 3. So it should say x equals 3. Maximum. So when they're upside down like this, do they have a highest point or a lowest point? When it's facing down, it has a highest point, so we call that a maximum. However, whenever it's facing up like this, it has a lowest point, so we call that a minimum. Quadratic formula, we're not going to get into this yet, but just be aware that this is coming, the quadratic formula. It looks scary, but in reality, whenever you have a formula, it's pretty much just giving you your answer. Discriminant goes along with the quadratic formula. Okay, so standard form, this is how you'll usually see a quadratic equation, is y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Vertex form, we'll start seeing this more later on, and you might see a little bit of it now, is where it has a times x minus h squared plus k. H and k are the vertex, and x equals h is the axis of symmetry. So that's really cool to know, and it helps you a whole lot. So like in this case right here, y equals 3 times x plus 2 squared plus 4. The vertex is the opposite of this, negative 2, and 4. See the title right there? Okay, and then the axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2, which is just this here. Okay. Completing the square, we'll get into that later. We'll also show you all this completing the square later. Okay, so let's get to our assignment today. I'm going to do the very first part with you, and then we're going to move on from there. Okay? So, let's look at this first one. First thing it says, where is the vertex? The vertex is the very lowest point right here. Okay? So it's at 0.5 or 1/2. Okay? And it goes all the way down to, it looks like 4.25 or 4 1/4. Now we always want to write that in fraction form. So whenever we write that, so we have 4.25. You type that in your calculator, 4.25. Hit math, enter, enter. And it tells you that it's 17 over 4. Okay, you hit math, enter, enter, and it'll change a decimal into a fraction. Okay? Now, they want to know, is it a maximum or a minimum? Okay? So does it have a very highest point or a very lowest point? This one has a very lowest point. So this would be a minimum. So now we're going to look at the axis of symmetry. Okay, the axis of symmetry. It's a line that goes straight through the center. Okay, so let's draw a line straight through the center. Okay, where does that hit the x-axis? Right here at 1/2. So it'd be x equals 1/2. X equals 1/2. The next question wants to know the number of roots. Okay, the number of roots. So the roots are also the what? Also the x-intercept. It's very important you know that. Okay, the roots are also the x-intercept. So there's one here at -2, and then there's one here at 3. Okay, so there's 2 roots. What are the roots? Well, let's write them down. -2 is the x, and how high up does it go? It stops at 0. Okay, that's your point, -2, 0, because it's an x-intercept, so the y must be 0. Now over here, this is that point, can you guess it? Try doing it before I do. It's at 3, 0. Okay? So this is how you're going to do the other 3 problems. Once you finish them, bring that up to me so I can check over it and be sure you've done it correctly. And then you will work on Alex when you're finished.